the Equal Opportunities Forum. Okay, that's the meeting now recording. So I'll take the sedent of the Equal Opportunities Forum on 21st of September 2022. I can see that we have present Councillors Kalikis, Clark, Corbett, Ferguson. I have apologies from Councillor McAdams, but I have Councillor Keat acting as a substitute. Also present today are Councillors Razak, Robb, Salamati and Councillor Thompson. We also have a number of officers present at today's meeting, as well as trades union representatives. Okay, so I'm now going to move on to item 1 of the agenda, which is declaration of interests. Does anybody have any? I'm not seeing any hands. So with that, I will move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is appointment of chair. Can I ask for any nominations for chair, please? Councillor Clark. No.
There you go, thank you. I'd like to propose Councillor Janine Kalikis as chair. Thanks.
Do you have a seconder? Let's see, Councillor Salamati. Councillor Salamati, would you like to come in? Hi. Oh. Hi, Councillor Salamati, you're on mute. You're on mute, Councillor Salamati. Yeah. I've lost you again. Hi. You're still on mute, Councillor Salamati. Do you have any buttons muted on your laptop? No. Bear with me. Okay, Councillor Kalikis is saying that she can hear you remotely, but we're not hearing you in the room. Do you want to indicate in the chat facility if you're seconding Councillor Clark's proposal? Or try again, please.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now, yes, thank you.
Okay. I would like to second Councillor
You're
Ross's
seconding,
proposal.
thank you, Councillor Salamati. Okay, I've got Councillor Thompson ready to speak. I'll just bring you in. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I'd like to propose Councillor Morazak. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor McGeever, are you seconding?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to second Councillor Razak.
Thank you. I also have Councillor Robb wanting to speak. I'll just bring you in now. Hi.
Yep. It was just a wee question, as it's my first time on the council and I've got no allegiances and genuinely an open mind and no experience of this previous committee. Can I ask anyone who wants to be chair or deputy chair to just explain a bit more, just like a job interview, almost like why you want to do this and what you feel you would, what the committee could do and your experience on equalities. I've just got a genuinely open mind on it, so I'm open to being persuaded. Thank you.
Councillor Kalikis, do you want to come in on that?
Happy to. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I suppose the Equal Opportunities Forum is a scrutiny forum. It's not a decision-making body. I feel we have to be able to steer the forum towards more scrutiny and be able to freely ask why we aren't doing more if we feel that's the case. I was on the forum over the last 5 years and it is a really lovely meeting. It's great to hear about all the things that the council does well. Excuse me. and all of the work that Elizabeth and Anne and Jill and the team put into making our council a more equal place. However, I do always raise questions, and I would aim to hone and strengthen the forum's scrutiny role. I also sat on Mo's Equity Cross-Party Working Group, and I was glad to do so, and I put myself forward for that. An example of what I suppose practice what I preach. In the previous administration, I was instrumental in our group prioritising a number of initiatives. Prior to being elected as a councillor, I was a founding member of our local branch of Women for Independence, and half a member of the National Committee for Women for Independence, half a member because myself and Councillor Katie Loudon insisted on being allowed to join as one candidate to demonstrate that job sharing, which we believe can be extremely beneficial in bringing women to the table, can be done in a political environment. So we pushed for that. Our local branch led a period poverty initiative back in 15 before anybody was talking about this stuff, and we were successful in, among other things, getting period products made available in every parcel given out by our local food banks. So I brought this knowledge and experience to our council policy on that matter. Locally, I organise annual trips to Pride events and considered an ally by all the LGBTQ plus community members that I know. I was delighted to see a Pride event in South Lanarkshire for the first time this year. How can we support this community as a council to expand and flourish? I'd like to see more scrutiny of education policy around LGBTQ plus young people. Where is there scope for within existing legislation to improve their experiences at school and at home? Likewise, the experience of our Black children and other children of colour, are doing enough to educate on Black and ethnic minority history in school? Are we doing enough to reflect the everyday lives of our Black and other young people of colour's lived experiences? And finally, I would say, as a disabled female single parent to an LGBTQ plus child and a child with autism and complex needs, I'm very passionate about everyone getting a fair crack at the whip and how we anticipate equality issues before they make accommodations for everyone before they become barriers.
Thank you. Councillor Razak, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you. Bit of a surprise being asked to put myself forward. Firstly, I would say that I've been in politics for 7 years now. Chaired the equity group that was on in the last term. I'm also in the cross-party working group with the Scottish Government on Islamophobia. Represented at a national level for equal opportunities with NFRN, that's the Federation for Independent Retailers, and also my desires, I would say a game plan would be to frame and have specific tasks for each year and also actions for every meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Razak. So we will now move to a vote. For the purposes of the vote, the nomination of Councillor Kalikes, proposed by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Salamati, will be considered the motion. The nomination of Councillor Razak, proposed by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor McGeever, will be considered as the amendment. Okay, so we'll now just launch the vote. Okay, we'll just be closing the vote in just a moment. Everybody's okay, and we'll just close the vote now. Okay, so we had 5 numbers of votes in favour of the motion and 5 numbers of votes in favour of the amendment. So as we have an equal number of votes, what we have to do is, in the event of a tie, we will use a pack of cards. As you can see, I do have an unopened packet of cards here. Should maybe have brought scissors. Okay, as you can see, it is an unopened box of cards. So the motion was Councillor Kalikis, so I'm just going to cut the card. And we have 4. And for the amendment, Councillor Razak, we have an ace, and the ace is the highest card. So, Councillor Razak, you have been appointed as chair of the Equal Opportunities Forum, and if you want to take your place. Councillor Razak has asked that I move on to item 3 and take the nominations for Deputy Chair of the Equal Opportunities Forum. Do we have any nominations? Councillor Clark.
Thanks. I'd like to propose Councillor Janine Kalikis as Deputy Chair. Thanks.
Do you have a seconder? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody seconding. Do we have a seconder for nomination? Oh, I've got Councillor Salamati. Hi, Councillor.
Yeah, I would second Councillor Ross's motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salamati. Do we have any other nominations for position of Deputy Chair?
Can I propose Mark McGeever?
Yep. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Thompson, would you like to come in?
Thank you. I'd like to second Councillor Mark McGeever. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Okay, so we're now going to go to another vote for position of Deputy Chair. So if you just select your voting preference when the options are brought up for the vote, please. Oh, sorry, my apologies. So for the purpose of the vote, the nomination of Councillor Kalikis, proposed by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Salamati, will be considered as the motion. And the nomination of Councillor McGeever, proposed by Councillor Razak and seconded by Councillor Thompson, will be considered the amendment. And if you can now cast your vote. We'll now close the votes. Thank you. Okay, there were 5 number of votes in favour of the motion, 5 number of votes in favour of the amendment. In this case, the Chair has the deciding vote.
Thank you. My vote would be Mac McGeever.
Councillor McGeever, you have been appointed as Deputy Chair of the Equal Opportunities Forum, if you would like to take your seat.
Well, thank you, everyone. Firstly, I would like to say that this very first meeting we've got some items, 5 items in front of us. But for the next meeting, we'll be sending out an email and making a list of what we want to include in the meetings, and then work out a plan for the next meeting to see how we split the work. Okay, thank you. So, agenda item 4 is working together with our Gypsy and Traveller community. And invite Jonathan Reid, Strategy and Policy Advisor, to deliver his presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for inviting us along today. As the Chair has highlighted, my name is Jonathan Reid. I'm a Strategy and Policy Advisor with Housing and Technical Resources within the Council, and I have strategic responsibility for the resource for our services delivered to the Gypsy Traveller community within South Lanarkshire. I had hoped to be joined today by one of our community representatives from the Gypsy Traveller site at Shawlands Crescent in Larkhall. And many members will be aware Tommy Bennett has done a fantastic amount of work for the Gypsy Traveller community over the last couple of years, raising awareness of some of the issues they face, and it's gone on to a national scale now, and he's that popular. He's in demand elsewhere today, I'm afraid. So, fortunately, Tommy sends his apologies. I know some members are probably keen to speak with a customer representative rather than myself. So, if there is any questions you have directly for the community after the presentation, I'm more than happy to take them back, and Tommy's agreed to provide a response to yourselves as well, should you have any questions. I'd like to start today's presentation, if you can see the slides there, just by providing a bit of background to the services that we have within South Lanarkshire for Gypsy Travellers. So we have 2 sites, one located at Springbank Park in East Kilbride. It's a smaller site, it's 6 pitches and approximately 16 to 20 residents at any one time. And we also have our larger site at Shawlands Crescent in Larkhall, which currently has 18 pitches and around about 80 to 90 residents at any one time as well. So well over 100 residents residing on council sites within South Lanarkshire. Both of these sites were constructed over 30 years ago. They met the design standards at the time. They were state-of-the-art at the time. And over the last 30 years, they've been in high demand, really low turnover on the sites, people wanting to stay there, people willing to make sure they keep hold of their pitch. However, throughout this time as well, they continued to meet the minimum standards, but there's recognition that the needs of residents have changed over this time. So the families that have stayed there have grown, their young people have grown up, and the type of accommodation that they've sought as well has changed over time, looking for more spacious accommodation options that the sites have been really struggling to keep up with. We've had a long-standing approach to engagement with Gypsy Travellers in South Lanarkshire. We've had a number of group meetings taking place. We've had informal individual discussions. We have dedicated site officers at both of the sites, supported by local management teams. And this has all resulted in really high resident satisfaction scores across both sites. And I suppose it alludes to what I mentioned earlier on, in that we've had people that want to stay there, really high demand on the sites as well. However, recognising that people's needs have changed, we've embarked upon a fairly substantial investment programme to upgrade the sites to try and meet the needs of the community today. And just before the pandemic hit, we were at the cusp of developing these and finalising these plans. And obviously, as with everything else, when the pandemic arrived, priorities had to change. So working with our community, the initial reaction to the pandemic was very much about communication. It was about making sure they were fully aware of everything that was available to them to support them through this very unsettling and very difficult time. Recognising as well, as many local public organisations did, was that the Gypsy Traveller community were particularly susceptible to issues caused by COVID-19 in the way that the close-knit community that live together, the sharing of accommodation options, the close families and how different households coming together on a regular basis. And so the restrictions that were put into place caused real problems for the community. And we wanted to make sure we were there, along with partner organisations and different services from the council, to try and support them as much as we possibly could. Ranged from issuing direct newsletters, specific newsletters just for them, daily welfare calls completed by the site officers. Now, these site officers used to be on the sites on a daily basis. We had to withdraw the frontline service initially because that was the guidance at the time. So we wanted to make sure the residents were still in contact with. Free power cards to make sure that nobody was going without power, and we sought funding and issued them out as well. And then recognising as well that the impact to the trades that many of our residents worked within. We provided virtual money and benefit advice surgeries as well, getting services onto the site, making sure that they had access to the right people to talk about what options would be to support families who had been impacted financially. Recognising as well that young people would become very isolated on the sites had they not been able to attend education facilities due to the lockdown that was in place. We made sure that we worked with education to make sure that activity packs and education resources were issued out to the site as well. And we worked with COSLA and the Scottish Government to follow guidance that was issued at that time. One of the big things and one of the things that really resonated with the residents as well was the fact that we were able to work with the NHS to provide on-site testing, which was a big thing for the community, is that many of the older members of the community weren't able to drive, weren't able to get about, and were reliant on younger family members to take them to doctor's appointments or health clinics, whatever it might be, including testing sites. But obviously the guidance at the time was don't cross your households, don't share cars with people and things like that as well. So we were concerned that older people were slightly more isolated on the sites. And so we worked with the NHS to bring testing onto the site, which had a real positive impact as a result. So as the pandemic continued, and we all know how long it went on for, we really forged close relationships with the people that were living on the sites at the time. And we recognised that there was a real strong appetite from them to maintain the work that we'd been doing with them previously, but not only maintain it, but try and get it moving as quickly as possible. So we had that really close-knit engagement that had been kind of almost forced as a result of the pandemic and the circumstances we were all working in, and also the residents were living in as well. And so we said, great, let's harness this, let's try and make the most of this and move on with the upgrades that we wanted to do, but not only the upgrades in terms of the site, but also make sure our services are able there to support should anything like this happen again in future, or they're structured in such a way that we can continue to be flexible and adapt and work with residents to meet their needs. So we centred it around 3 of these outcomes, which are outlined at the bottom just there, and I'll go on to touch each of these in just a wee second, but essentially they're improving community engagement and empowerment, tackling digital exclusion and reducing social isolation, and reducing fuel poverty and improving energy efficiency. And these all align with the National Gypsy Traveller Action Plan developed by COSLA and the Scottish Government. So the first one, improving engagement and empowerment being the key word within that, is Gypsy Travellers historically have had a bit of a trust issue, and I'm sure if Tommy was here he'd be saying exactly the same thing with a lot of the public services that have been provided to them, and that's a national thing. It's not just based within South Lanarkshire. So what we wanted to do was find out the ways that they wanted to engage with us. And you can see the table there. There's 2 different sites in South Lanarkshire, and they're very different in terms of the way that the residents would like to engage with us. And we worked with that. Once they told us how they'd like to engage, we said, no problem at all. If that means you're going to keep talking to us, then great, let's follow that. And you can see Shawlands Crescent, very open, a bit more structured in terms of the Tenants and Residents Association that they have. They wanted the site meetings to continue, whether they be virtual, whether they be in person as well. And it was very much an open door policy for all the officers that were involved in the development work prior to the pandemic starting, or as the engagement ramped up during the pandemic. It was a case of give us a call and talk to us whenever you need to. At Springbank Park, the approach was slightly different, and residents were a bit more private. They wanted to just have those individual discussions with the the trusted site officer that they knew and had been with them for a number of years. And we continued with that approach as well, making sure that they still received the same amount of information and communication, but just delivered in a different format and still had the opportunities to suggest new things or to talk to us about whatever they may want to talk about. And I mentioned earlier on that we were at the cusp of delivering a range of improvement works to the site, and we'd done this through the development of site master plans, working with residents to understand what they'd like to see on their sites and work that they'd like to take forward. And as a result of this increased engagement that we were able to build upon during the pandemic, we were able to get these finalised during the pandemic as well, actually. And what these master plans do is help try and alleviate some of those trust issues that the community may have, outlining the short, medium and long-term projects or proposals that they'd requested, that they'd asked for, alongside works that we had to do to meet legislative compliance, to meet fire safety requirements within the sites as well, and putting them all on an even footing, not saying that, we have to do all this and we'll think about your stuff later. It was very much that we'll try and progress this all at the same time and be as transparent as possible to try and develop that trust a little bit further. In addition to the transparency point, we also highlighted where the funding was coming from to deliver these works. So if the council was fully funding it, if it was something we were getting money externally for, or if it was sort of national funding sources, we highlighted this and the requirements of what we had to spend within that as well. So the residents really built up their knowledge of how councils are funded and how capital projects are funded and things as well, which was great to see and helped sort of explain why things perhaps took a little bit longer than they may expect to. And here's an example or an excerpt of one of the master plans. So you can see in the centre of the screen there's a kind of layout, a simplified layout of the Shawlands Crescent site and a range of the projects. And the reason why they're set out like this is to allow residents to understand them as much as possible as well, with the reduced kind of literacy rates within the Gypsy Traveller community. We didn't want to give them a big corporate document that, to be honest, they may not be interested in reading, but also may have struggled to understand as well. So we wanted to try and make it as accessible as possible for everybody. And took the time, the site officers took the time to issue this out and read people through it as well. And we brought this along to every single residents meeting and said, this is where we are and this is what project stage we're at for each of them. And as I said before, being realistic on the ability to deliver during the pandemic and beyond as well. So if those things that we simply couldn't do because of the restrictions in place or material shortages or funding priorities elsewhere, we told residents that and said, it's still on the plan, it will get delivered, but we should be able to deliver it at a later date. And the master plans go in a bit more detail about the engagement aspect as well. So what are we going to talk to you about and when? When are you going to have the ability to influence these jobs? And not only have you told us that you'd like to see this project delivered on the site, or have we told you this is something we have to do to maintain compliance? It's a case of we'll talk to you throughout it and give you the opportunity to shape and change that as much as you'd like to do, and concurrent engagement right the way throughout, and explain to them as well why we have to do certain things. And you'll see the varied range of projects that are listed on that there, and some interesting, some probably from a resident's point of view not so interesting in terms of sewage and lighting and things like that, but certainly from their point of view we tried to make sure they're aware of why we had to do everything as much as possible. And so I suppose looking at some of the work that's actually been achieved then. So this is the pitch extensions that we've got on the master plan. Sorry, I've gone, there we go. So they aim to, initially the reason behind the pitch extensions was for us to comply with fire safety guidance to achieve minimum spacing between caravans or chalets that was required by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and then through the Scottish Housing Regulator as well. That, however, turned into a conversation with residents of being, well, actually, we have to provide all this extra space, so what would you like to see on it? And they started telling us, well, as I said at the start, the different accommodation options that Gypsy Travellers would like now, as opposed to 30 years ago, are that they'd like what they term as chalets. So many people might call them static caravans. So larger caravans, 40 foot sort of in length, 10 foot, 12 foot wide, much bigger than something you may be able to pull behind a car, which is what many of the residents were living in before. Now, previously, the pitch layouts, you wouldn't be able to fit one of them on and comply with the fire safety guidance, but doing this work has allowed residents then to upgrade their accommodation and meet the needs of their family, provide extra bed space, provide extra living areas, and that is really seen as a massive positive for the residents on the site. So the photos at the top there show you a kind of before of when the site clearance was taking place, and then as the pitch increases on the top right photo have just been finalised, And residents shaped all that. So they determined what the fencing would be between the pitches. They determined where the posts would be in a way that allow them to connect up the utilities as well. And we worked with them to design their individual pitches, essentially, a bit like what we'd do should we be designing a new house or a new property that we'd be looking to build through our affordable housing supply programme. Pitch works are still ongoing. You'll see that the bottom pictures there, they were just taken a couple of weeks ago, and that's the final phase. So we're on to phase 3 of the pitch extensions, and we're looking to expand the final set over the next couple of weeks. They'll be finalised, and you can see the massive amount of infrastructure that's had to go in. So all the upgrades to the utilities, but also the like retaining wall, because we're building into banking, the tree clearance, the shrub clearance, all that kind of stuff had to be done. So it's a massive, significant investment from the council to achieve this, but the plus side is that the residents have got what they wanted in terms of being able to provide different accommodation options. And you can see a quote from a resident on the bottom left of the screen there saying they've now got a space to have a chalet, giving them everything they need in one place. The next theme, or the outcome that I wanted to raise, was the tackling digital exclusion and reducing social isolation, which is a big thing within the Gypsy Traveller community, and certainly was accelerated during the pandemic. We had plans to tackle some of this before the pandemic started, but once that kicked in and we realised how difficult it was for the community to access mainstream services, we tried to accelerate that as much as possible to allow them to do that. And one of the big things that we noticed was that because the Gypsy Traveller sites where they are, they're not able to just simply phone up one of the broadband providers and get an installation of broadband similar to you and I perhaps would. So we said, okay, well, we can combat that and we can provide the Wi-Fi on the site. So we secured external funding for that, and we worked with an infrastructure company to get that put in place and provide that free to access for everybody, to break down the barriers of anybody that may be financially struggling to get online, and allow them to access what services they need to. And we provided devices through the likes of the Connect in Scotland initiative to enable them to do that. We also trained up our site officers to provide sort of first-hand technical support, obviously not any IT support or anything like that, but just simple things like accessing websites where they can make payments, that kind of thing, and that's really gone down really well with residents as well, providing that a bit of independence for them to be able to do those things. Should anything like a pandemic happen again, they'll be in a much better position to be able to access the services if everything goes back online or over the phone. We worked with education, health and support services as well to try and increase the access to their services that they have online, but also in person as well. And the big thing that we've done to tackle social isolation is the installation of a new community facility within Shawlands Crescent as well. Here's some photos of said community facility. So this was a really big project that started pre-pandemic. There was an old facility that was at Shawlands Crescent, and it was beyond repair, to be honest. It was very small, didn't meet the needs of what the groups wanted to use it for at the time. So we worked with residents basically with a blank sheet of paper and said, what is it you would like to see on the site? And this facility, as I say, now has everything you need. It's got a kitchen, it's got accessible toilets, it's got a separate office space where we have NHS Keepwell coming in to provide clinics and work with residents. We've also then got a kind of main room which has it can be set up as a classroom for any classes, and we have education coming in. We have universal connections, the Mackin Trust coming in to deliver classes on the site to people. And we've really seen some real improvements for community cohesion as a result of this. It's really worked well. There's been a lot of positive feedback from that. We had an opening ceremony on late August there that I know certainly some of the councillors here today were at. And it was really positive in that we had the young people from the site fully involved in that. We have the residents from the site fully involved in the opening ceremony, planning the facilities, telling people where they'd like to show them on the site, show them their homes, all that kind of thing. And it really helped to bring everybody that had been involved in this project together. One story that I know Tommy was keen to share with you today was as a result of providing these kind of facilities, and that's what we do is provide these facilities and aim for the community to take them forward. One story that he's certainly talked about a lot of time has been one of the elderly site residents who's never been able to read or write and has since been going along to some of the classes at this facility provided by education. Was able to a couple of months ago read her first poem and stood up in front of the class and was able to do that, which is a fantastic achievement and shows, I suppose, if you give people the facilities to do something, then they'll take with that and they'll actually achieve something that they didn't probably think they could do, or perhaps other people didn't think they could do either. So it really brings out the human aspect of what we're achieving on the sites as well. And again, just on this theme, we've got a range of equipment that's been put into the community facility as well. And you'll see on the left-hand photo there, the young people at the site who we received some external funding for some devices and equipment. And we asked them, what would you like to see in the community facility? What would attract you to play with it? And the biggest answer came back was a PlayStation 5, which was great for our procurement team to try and source one of them. But we're able to do so. It's been delivered. It's on the site, and you'll see they're actually using it there as well, which is fantastic. And it's great to see something that you've been involved in, designed, and particularly from the residents, actually working and delivering what it should be doing. And not only within the site, but we've found that it's breaking down barriers between those that live on the site and people elsewhere within Larkhall as well. So there's been young people inviting their friends that live in mainstream housing along to the community facility to play and come and see where they live, which is something I've been told by residents didn't really happen before, but now there's a safe, accessible space for young people to play on the site. And we're also seeing engagement between the gypsy travellers that live on the site and gypsy travellers that live in mainstream housing or live in yards elsewhere within South Lanarkshire as well. Now that there's somewhere for the young people to go, they're actually bringing them to the site and knowing that, okay, this is a safe space to play, as I said. And that's then allowing the parents and the adults to then talk to each other and engage with one another as well, which again is all what we wanted to achieve with this community facility and really tackle that social isolation that does exist within the gypsy traveller community. And a couple of the images there just on the Wi-Fi that we installed and devices that we gave out, and a quote from one of the tenants as well. Now, the final outcome that I wanted to touch upon today was something that's probably even more pertinent now than it was when we started talking about with our residents, but it's around reducing fuel poverty and improving energy efficiency. And when we first started engaging, certainly over the last couple of years with our residents about what they'd like to see, they told us about the high costs of energy that they have to pay because they have these different accommodation styles within their individual pitch. So not only do they have the amenity unit that we provide to heat and to cover the costs of electricity for, but they have their chalets or caravans as well, which has both gas and electricity as well. So they almost have three different, funding methods of having to fund these things, and it adds up to a little bit more than perhaps you'd expect it to. So we said to them, okay, what would help? And they showed us that the heating arrangements that they had within the amenity units weren't actually that good at the time. They weren't working as they should do. So we worked with them to understand what would work, and we came up with different technology, new innovative technology. And we found a supplier to do that. We piloted that with residents and a couple of willing volunteers across both sites, and then it came back really positive. So then we rolled that out to the other pitches, and we've seen real improvements as a result of that. People wanting to use that amenity unit space a little bit more than they perhaps did before. And it's simple things that we may consider, if we're trying to save energy, something that we probably would take for granted, if you like. So residents used to run cables from the inside of the amenity units out to their caravans or chalets, which then left the window open all the time. But the heating was on full blast, and they couldn't understand why the amenity unit wasn't warming up. So what we did was a part of the amenity unit upgrades was to install external sockets, a simple solution, but allowed them to keep their windows shut. And stop paying to heat up the outside, essentially. So things like that have really made a difference to residents' life, and we're continuing to work with them as the pressures on the energy market, as the energy prices increase, particularly around the gas canisters that they get. We continue to work with them to try and identify these little solutions that will hopefully reduce the bills and their outgoings. Here's a couple of photos of the amenity unit works that we have done, and you can see aesthetically. I don't know if anybody saw. I didn't put a picture on of what they looked like before, but aesthetically they're much more improved. They all match on all the sites now, so it's a bit uniform across the sites, and most importantly they're warmer, much warmer to live in. New doors, windows, roofs, insulation right the way throughout, cladding on the outside, energy efficient lighting as well to try and reduce the bills. And you can see one of the heating options in the centre picture there as well, and one of the quotes from the residents in terms of just how much of a difference, again, the human aspect all this work is having on the lives that they lead within the sites. Now, all this work hasn't gone unnoticed, which is really positive. We've been recognised nationally through the Municipal Journal Awards, through the Innovation in Building Diversity Inclusion, So that's a UK-wide one, and also then COSLA as well recognised us through the Excellent People, Excellent Clerk Awards last year, which has been fantastic to get that recognition, but more so for the residents themselves to be seeing themselves on the front page of national publications such as the Municipal Journal, on the COSLA website, things like that, recognising that actually what we're doing here is something that's a bit unique. It is something that we're getting. We should continue doing that, and it's good for us because they want to continue talking with us and tell us what they'd like, but it's more important for them that all that hard work, all that volunteering that they're doing is being recognised. That has led to a big increase in inquiries from the Scottish Government, from other local authorities, from other site providers even down in England, asking what is it that South Lanarkshire are doing and how are they doing that, how are they getting the residents on their side to talk to, breaking down those trust issues that I spoke about before. In terms of next steps, we're absolutely committed to continue working with residents of both traveller sites. We've got the master plans in place. Phase 1's pretty much complete in terms of the actions that have been done. There's another 2 phases that it starts going into things that the residents have asked more about, and as they build up their knowledge of what they could be provided and what the council could do, they're adding to that list quite considerably. So we review them all the time, and we'll continue working with them to try and achieve what we can and help them make the sites what they want them to be. And I suppose the most important word, as I said at the start on that slide there, is probably empower. Give them the belief that they can make the difference. They can change where they live. They can change much wider than that, the services that are being provided to them. Something that I think it's safe to say, and I'm sure Tommy would agree if he was here today, that they haven't been able to do until now, or haven't felt able to do up until the last wee while. So that's certainly something we're trying to achieve. I'll end on this photo here, and that gives you an idea of the scale of the number of people, the residents, officers, representatives from other departments, contractors, other organisations as well, that were all involved in just that one community facility project, and probably deserve all the recognition of all the work that's gone on. So happy to take any questions, or as I say, if there's anything that you'd like to ask any of the residents, we can take them as well and come back to you as soon as we can. Thank you.
I'll make it brief. I welcome the report. It's so important about inclusion, keeping everybody involved and the whole community being looked after. Just a couple of questions. The education one, to make sure it's continued to be robust, because I think that one day, not just for the travelling sites, people leave school and they're competent in numeracy and literacy, so important. And how the travelling people, how are they comparing to like other pupils in the area? Is it comparable? Is there a gap? The other one was the feedback you're getting from the people about the service delivery. Are you quite encouraged with that? And the last one is medical care. Like opticians, doctors, dentists, etc. Are they being well catered for? And the feedback for that again, is that satisfactory, or is it something we can improve in? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. So yes, in relation to, I suppose I'll take them in reverse. So in relation to the medical care one, we are working very closely with the NHS. As I said, NHS keep well come onto the site on a regular basis and provide services for that. And I think the latest discussions we've had with NHS providers and Health and Social Care Partnership is there's adequate medical cover across the residents that live on the site. They have acknowledged that there is issues wider than the residents that live on our site, though, with the Gypsy Traveller community in general. And what they'd like to do is use the residents that we have that are engaged with services, that have the doctors, that registered with doctors and things, to try and understand why perhaps those aren't living on our sites aren't doing the same. Is it an accessibility thing? Is it, it's just not up their priorities? What is the difference between those that live on our sites and those that don't? So they're aware of that, and they're going to try and work to try and resolve some of those issues. But as far as our sites go, I think we're fairly comfortable that yes, the residents have the access to the services that they need for that. But that's an ongoing conversation that we have with them, and having things like the new community facility and having the facility for NHS services to come onto the site opens up a lot of doors for that as well. So any kind of transport issues or anything, perhaps they could be alleviated by that. But it's certainly something we're regularly discussing with them as their landlord, if you like, and then we certainly hand over to the NHS providers or whoever it might be to pick up where that goes. In terms of the feedback we're getting from residents, it's really, really positive. That said, though, they are residents and tenants, and just like our mainstream tenants, everybody's got their own individual things that they want to get resolved with their landlord, essentially. So that's an ongoing conversation. And I think the fact that we have this kind of structure now where we have the ongoing meetings, we have the newsletters, they know who to speak to should there be an issue, is something that really helps resolve some of the issues before they come too big. So we know at the moment, for example, there's things on that master plan that they'd like to see done tomorrow. Things like internal upgrades, kitchen replacements within some of the existing amenity units, things like that, that we obviously can't deliver all at the same time, as well as the works that are going on just now. So we're trying to explain to them we're working through the projects you told us, and we'll come to them. They're on the master plan, they'll get upgraded. They'll also get upgraded as part of, you know, mainstream repairs that we do across the council. So it's trying to just, you know, keep that communication going with them to try and resolve any of the little issues that happen before they spiral, essentially. But as I say, with all the work that we've gone on, it's generally been really positive, and I think there's, you know, a belief now that if we say something, the council listen, and partners listen, and organisations listen, which is a good thing, and should have happened a long time ago. Can't remember if that was all your questions, Councillor. If there was another one, sorry.
Right, thank you. How would it go? The other question was about the education and about attainment levels compared for the travelling site there to other people in the community. Would you agree, and how can we make sure that literacy and numeracy are dealt with, and try and make sure they get the best delivery when they leave school, they're competent enough to enhance their social life, their education and indeed employment opportunities? Thank you.
Yep, apologies, I missed that one there. But yeah, I think it's probably, if Tommy was here, he'd be able to give you an outstanding answer to that. I think in relation to a general point of view for gypsy travellers, I think it's something like primary 5 education is the average of what an adult gypsy traveller has, compared to obviously much higher for mainstream. So there is a gap there, and it's I couldn't speak of what's happening just now in the schools and young people in schools. I do know that the young people on the sites are at schools, in the mainstream schools in Larkhall, and those that aren't able to attend, we've now got things and plans in place for them to get education in a different manner. So what I could do is I'll take that back to our colleagues in education and ask them to come back to you with a more detailed response than I could provide.
Okay, thanks for that answer. Thanks, Chair, for indulging me. Let me, I know I took up a bit of time, but the education is slightly concerned about all the answers there, that I would love to see improvements for these children and to give them a better chance and better enhancement in life. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a few comments and probably a couple of questions as well. I'd like to welcome and thank Jonathan for the presentation. I know we spoke at the relaunch of, or the launch of the community facility at Shawlands Crescent, where we were there speaking to residents. I know Christina McKelvey, MSP, was there, who's heavily involved in this sort of thing, and we're speaking to residents, which is the most important part of it, is working with residents. I'm pleased to see the commitment going forward to constantly engaging with people with the lived experience along the full way, because as you said, it's important to build up that trust, because even though there is increased trust there, we're still not fully there yet, and we need to do what we can to build that up. Because I know in the past, I think the community's felt a bit policed rather than people working with them. I think in the past there's been maybe wardens on site and things like that, where it just feels like, as I said, they're being policed rather than worked with. So that they're quite right at times to not have that full level of trust with the council. But I'm glad to see that improving, and it's good to see that we're determined to also improve literacy rates and so on alongside the community. But there is also, even though there's a lot of good work being done, especially the community facility, which was really good to see, and it was impressive. And I did see the PlayStation 5 in there, which I think was being used at the time, but I can't really remember. But all the kids seemed to have really good fun going in and out it, and a lot of people seemed really appreciative of it. But I know there is still some other issues that need to be worked on. And I think it's with some of the older facilities, there's some issues with black mould. I was speaking to some of the residents about, and some of the conditions, maybe some of the older units isn't up to full standard and isn't really suitable for people to be living in full time. They might have other health complications. So I know that's an issue because the community want to receive the same support as the rest of the council. Because another one of the issues, which I believe was exacerbated during the pandemic, was that one of the delivery companies, I think it was Royal Mail, a lot of the letters and so on weren't getting to residents. Because I believe in the past that a delivery person or multiple, I'm not sure, try to deliver letters to the site or packages or whatever, and they were met with a dog, with or an angry dog, and with the rest of our communities, there's a procedure you would follow. You would try and redeliver and so on, but what happened was that they kept delivering it to, I can't remember what it was, but one of the buildings there. But during the pandemic, there was no one in there, so a lot of people were missing out on, their vaccination letters and so on, which are obviously really important to get through on time. And no doubt people would have missed or been late to appointments and so on. So that's one of the other issues. I know that's been addressed with Royal Mail and so on to try and make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen again. Because as I said, they want to receive the same support as the rest of the council's receiving. And similar to that, one of the other problems is prejudice. Is you'll know a lot of people outside the community have a negative view of gypsy travellers. So I want to kind of ask how we're planning to address that, because that can provide a barrier to integration, especially with children and so on. It's important we tackle that early with people outside the community, and make sure also we're always challenging ourselves in the language we use, making sure it's always appropriate and that we're working with people. And many of the points that you mentioned were stuff I was going to ask about, the cables and so on. And as a general point that relates to this, but also relates to other issues, that even though I believe it's wrong that the administration hold both the chair and deputy chair of this committee, I hope it's going to continue on a scrutiny basis, and that you're both going to challenge the administration on issues like these and others, because it is a forum, it's not a decision-making body in itself. So try not to be too political in that, but I believe it's important to have that scrutiny aspect. Thanks.
We have Mark, then questions. Oh, apologies, John.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, it's just to pick up on Councillor Ross's point. So you're absolutely right. The issue with mail delivery was a big issue. It was something residents raised with us. It was actually unknown to many of the officers involved in the sites that it was even happening until such time as the pandemic came in, and residents then realised actually we're not getting anything we should do. Yep, we raised that with Royal Mail. We asked a couple of the local members to get involved as well, to put a bit of pressure on Royal Mail to help us out with that, and that was resolved. But it wasn't just resolved in a way that satisfactory for Royal Mail, it was resolved in a way to satisfy the residents. So we didn't just say you need to reinstate delivery to what it was. We went to residents and asked them, how would you like your mail delivered? Is there a particular way? Would you like us to put in a drop box that you can access? Would you like to have it door deliveries? And they came back and said back to door deliveries would be the best thing. So we tried to put in that element of choice for them as well. And then what we did was work with Royal Mail to find out how that would be easy. So we provided site plans to show them where the numbers were, because that was another thing that they'd highlighted, was we don't really know the sites and who lives where. So it's quite difficult for our personnel to do that. So we'd numbered, provided them with site plan, and then provided numbers, clear numbers for all the units and letter boxes as well for everybody, so that they could receive their mail. So there wasn't any barriers to avoid the service getting done. So that was a positive that came out of a negative, if you like. In terms of the prejudice, our residents are absolutely fantastic in advocating for themselves, and I think that's in part, and it's not all the credit, but I think it's in part it goes back to that word empowerment, letting them see what they can do on their own site and what they can do by talking to council officers or whoever else they may be talking to. And you know, if you see things online that we constantly, we don't shy away from putting things about what we've achieved with our Gypsy Traveller community online or through the SL View or social media, whatever it is, and you quite often see residents, you know, jumping into the conversations on that ensues, and it's really positive to see them sticking up for their own community in the way that they are. And again, I think that's down to empowerment, but you're absolutely right, there is prejudice that exists right across I'd say the UK or even wider than that against Gypsy travellers, and we're certainly doing our part to try and tackle that.
Thanks very much, Chair. Quite a lot of the kind of wee notes I had made have actually been raised by either Bert or Ross, so I won't go over it again. It does seem a really positive report, and about 20 years ago I actually worked in a traveller site in another authority in the west of Scotland, and it sounds as though it's come on leaps and bounds in terms of the council's albeit a different council, but in terms of this council's approach, and I'm very glad to hear that approach seems now increasingly to be supportive and responsive to the residents' needs themselves rather than prescriptive, which I think has maybe been the case in the past. As has been touched on, I think I'd encountered 2 decades ago now, right enough, that there was a significant challenge in terms of residents from a Gypsy Traveller site accessing services, social isolation and forming links with neighbouring residents in other parts of the community. And I'm glad that is all part of the kind of broader service that we are providing to tackle those issues. But I just want to check, and it's possibly a very silly question, I hope so, but the measures, the empowerment measures, the communications measures that are identified in this, they all sound great. I'm just wondering, are they going to continue in the long term? Because I think it's really important that it's not a case of the master plan is done, we move on. I would hope that the travellers, the Gypsy Traveller community would know that we will continue to want to hear their concerns about service provision and issues affecting them, and that the door is open for that going forward. And finally, if I can just make note, I was glad to see that there was a flexible approach for what works in terms of engaging with the 2 sites, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. So, sorry, just an aside to that, just because I think it is worth mentioning to assure Councillor Clark that he is right. It's important that the scrutiny element of this forum is at the forefront, and certainly I would not take on this role if I had any other mindset, and I know that's the same with you, Chair. We was fortunate enough that we worked together over the previous few years to pursue equity issues in the cross-party working group, indeed with Councillor Kalikis and with Councillor Donnelly from the other side, and former Councillor Eric Holford, who was always a champion for disability rights. I think a lot of good stuff came out of that, and we always worked on a cross-party basis without fear or favour to our own political parties, and I would certainly hope that would continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. And yep, no, absolutely agree. It shouldn't be a short-term approach. I suppose in the presentation, we highlighted the kind of long-standing engagement that we've had with residents, probably since the sites have started, and what's really ramped up over the last few years is the ability for us to then take that forward to actually making the improvement works that they're after. As opposed to just listening to them talk about it and us talking to them about it. So that's the significant change that's happened, but the engagement has been ongoing for a number of years and will continue to do so. What we'd like to do is deliver these improvement works, allow the residents to then live in the site, see what they're like then, and I have no doubt they'll come back to us with lots and lots of other additions that they'd like to see, and we'll work with them and continue with that approach.
Thank you. Yep, really want to congratulate the team and the volunteers on the site as well for all the work that they are doing. With a background in community development myself, I know these things take time and effort and hard work and flexibility and so on. So just a big congratulations to everyone involved. My question is a wee bit about how that carries on to other departments of the council. It's not so much related to this report, but I think there's a lot of learning that can come from what you've achieved and the value of partnership and empowerment and how that can be looked at across a shift in the culture in the council so that we do things with people, not to them, is of value. And so any learning points is really useful. And just as a additional point, I've spoken to Mo about this as well, the diversity training being new to this committee. I'm really keen to get some diversity training to make sure it's been a long time since I did anything on diversity training, so I'd really like the mandatory diversity training that was promised to Mo back in I think it was a June meeting to be taken forward, because I'm really keen that we all get up to speed on this.
Thanks, Chair. I can probably pick that up. So that the diversity training is online and available, so we'll make sure that's sent through so you can get an opportunity to undertake it and give us any feedback. And maybe also just to pick up on the community engagement point. So we have a community engagement team, and colleagues will be speaking to each other to gather experience and learn from each other, because you're right. You know, you kind of in terms of communities, you need to, it's a slow burn on occasions. You've got to build up trust. It takes a long time to earn that trust. It can be lost very quickly if you take a wrong step. So absolutely, I'll pick that up with the community engagement manager after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kallikis.
Hi, obviously echo the warm congratulations of all the other councillors who've spoken before me. It's obviously been a fantastic piece of work that's going on and that's ongoing. My question is not so much for Jonathan, but more for the council as a whole. Councillor Clark had asked about prejudice and what we're doing to tackle that and so on and so forth. I note that the Shawlands Crescent Centre, there was a post on the council's social media put up on the 2nd of September on Facebook. The comments on that are horrendous and they remain there. There's comments about how travellers don't pay council tax, they're uneducated, they're untrustworthy. Why do they get these facilities and we don't? Are non-travellers too far down the virtue signalling list? So on and so forth. I just wonder, as a council, what can we, can we moderate these comments a bit? And I appreciate that these can be being left by anybody. They might not be South Lanarkshire residents. But I think a bit of moderation over social media is the very least that we can do in terms of tackling prejudice. Thanks.
Sorry, Kay, can you reply to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, actually, I was thinking as Jonathan was presenting there, I happen to be a member of the Lark Hall Facebook page, and I recall some of that commentary coming on against the celebratory element round about the opening of a facility there. But actually, there were some really good comments came back, as Jonathan has stated, from the community, who were really keen to engage with those people who perhaps through social media had a misconception about the community and perhaps kind of long-standing. So that those individuals who are being invited to come to the Lark Hall community and see for themselves, engage with the community, be educated through the process. I will go and speak to Tom Little, the Head of Corporate Communications, after this and get a view on it. But in terms of the Council's social media posts, we try hard not to close down comments, but we do on occasions moderate some of the comments that are in there. But frequently, Tom will give me the advice about some of these comments will be self-correcting, so other people will come back in. But I'll take a look at those specific ones that you mentioned and I'll speak to him about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? There was one question I have, Jonathan. I'm not sure if you can answer this. I thought That would have been asked earlier on. The solar panel farm, PV farm, that's planned for installation. Are they going to have a backup for any excess power that's going to be generated?
Thanks, thanks, Chair. Yes, so the solar farm, that's a plan that we have been working with the Scottish Government to try and bring into fruition. So what we'd be planning to do with that, whether it takes the shape as a solar farm or it goes onto the roofs of the amenity units, is still to kind of be worked out, and dependent on external funding as well, because as you can imagine, these things are very, very expensive. But what we're trying to do is reduce the costs, as I was mentioning in the presentation, of residents, the outgoings that they have to pay. And what we'd be aiming to do is provide generation on site to be used on site. So any power that would be generated would be then stored in batteries on the site and then used by residents as and when they need it. It wouldn't be used as a backup, if you like. It'd just be used on demand as it's needed to go. So it'd still be, the site itself would still be connected to the grid, if you like, and it would still use power coming in from the grid, but it would use the solar power first. So then that would reduce what's needed, what's metered coming on through the grid as well. So as I say, it's the technical teams within property services are still working out the best method to do it. We're still discussing with external partners how the best method to fund it as well. But it's something that we've agreed to with the residents to try and mitigate the costs that they're telling us that are too high in terms of the energy that they're needing to use. And as I mentioned, across the different accommodation options they have on each pitch, you can see how it would quickly add up, the costs that they have. So it's something we're quite excited about. It's something that certainly our colleagues nationally as well within the likes of Home Energy Scotland are excited about. It's not been done before on a Gypsy Traveller site, so it'd be something that we'd be keen to progress, but there is a few kinks and a few more technical details we need to work out and make sure that it is ultimately going to deliver an improvement for the residents rather than be something that ends up being a hindrance or something that, you know, it ends up costing us more to maintain than actually what it delivers for the residents as well. So we'll keep, certainly happy to keep this forum updated on that and the progress as it goes, but it's on the master plan and it's something we'll hopefully achieve over the next year or so.
Okay. I'm mindful we're over the hour, but we have one last question from Councillor Grant Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I would like to thank you for the report and the presentation. That was fantastic. And I would like to ask, just with regards to the Chair now, usually with regards to the presentation, the PowerPoints, we get copies sent in advance prior to the meeting, so I would be able to read them. So, because for me, it's difficult to see the slides as the interpreter sits on top of the slides. So I was just wondering, and just a request for future forums and future meetings, is it possible to get some presentations or slides, like a slide deck, prior to the meeting, so I'm able to read that out, or read them before? And we're just wondering if that's all right. Just it allows me to gain access to all the information, just because the interpreter sits on top and it's in a different screen for me, so it's quite difficult for me to watch. So if it was just a request, if that was okay, and if there was any PowerPoints or presentations that could be given beforehand, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ferguson, and apologies for that. We should have had that done, and the next meeting onwards, we definitely have that done. Okay, can we go for a 5-minute break, since I think we are 10 minutes over the hour. Thank you. Okay, can we restart, please? We've only got one item left. So, item 5, annual report, mainstreaming equality and diversity. Housing and technical resources has page 3 to 12. And can I invite Jonathan Reid again, please, to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you again to members for inviting us along to provide this update today. So the purpose of this report is to provide an overview of progress made in relation to mainstreaming equalities within housing and technical resources during 2021-22, highlight the key actions with recommendations for the report to be noted. So this is our annual report, as detailed in section 3 in the background. This is an annual report which is provided to the Equalities Forum, the Equal Opportunities Forum, and highlights some of the positive work that's taken place over the last year within housing and technical resources and the various services it provides to enable the mainstreaming of equalities right across the resource. Section 4 of the report, on the second page, highlights the national and local policy developments. And again, this is provided annually to highlight some of the key changes that have taken place within the housing sector as a result of national policy or local policy amendments, or perhaps local updates to strategic approaches. So you can see there at 4.1, 4.2 and 4.3 that we've identified what's happening in terms of the rented sector strategy on a national level, the review of the public sector equality duty, and then finally locally at the local strategic commissioning plan developed by our colleagues at the Health and Social Care Partnership. All of which have a direct impact on the services we provide as a landlord, but also as a strategic housing authority, which obviously then in turn have an impact on the services we provide to vulnerable or protected groups. Section 5 of the report looks at the key areas of progress for 21-22. And you'll see there that we've identified that a lot of positive work has taken place, particularly during our affordable housing supply programme, Home Plus. So during 21-22, we delivered an additional 657 affordable homes for social rent across South Lanarkshire. When I say we, that's not just us, that's our partners within registered social landlords. And we, as part of that, had a target, an 8% target for the delivery of fully accessible wheelchair homes, and we exceeded that. We actually achieved 20% last year, as opposed to the 8% that was set. In terms of adaptations, at 5.2 of the report, over 1,500 homes were adapted to support people who may have disabilities, who may have requirements, mobility issues, whatever it might be, and that aims to allow them to stay in their own homes as opposed to moving to a care setting or elsewhere. And that's something that we've been really focused on taking forward through with our health and social care partners. And then at 5.3 of the report, we've identified a lot of the positive work that's taken place through the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, which is our key plan for tackling homelessness within South Lanarkshire. And again, some of the priorities and work taken forward to date has been provided within that section. On the next page, it's 5.4. We've identified some of the technology-enabled care work that's again taken forward, and I suppose in the presentation that we had just before the break there around Gypsy Traveller work that we're taking forward, exact same approach takes place right across a lot of our different customer groups. The pandemic highlighted the barriers that exist with people trying to access services online as everything else moves forward. And what we've tried to do is allow people to catch up, allow people to access services as they move forward. And we've done that, as you can see there in the bullets. There are a range of different customer groups, whether that be through the council homes at the new Blantyre Life facility, through the Bring an IT Home project, which aims to provide data and devices to our homeless households that are living in temporary accommodation to allow school children, for example, to do their homework when they're living in temporary accommodation, which is things we all take for granted, but is something that, you know, if you're going through a point of crisis such as homelessness, it's probably not something you're thinking about. So we try and break down those barriers, as I say, to do that. We have the Gypsy Traveller work that we've already discussed at length today. We have the harm reduction toolkit for homeless households as well. And we have things like doorbells, video doorbells installed for improving community safety for the likes of our sheltered tenants and other vulnerable customers as well. So you can see there's a whole host of range that we're trying to do to progress technology options for people to improve their lives and mainstream a lot of the work that is already taking place. In terms of 5.6 of the report, we've highlighted some of the positive work that's taken place within the refugee resettlement programmes. Now, obviously, this is looking at 21-22, and there's been a lot that's happened within that, as the report alludes to, since the end of the financial year with the Russian invasion of Ukraine as well. So, been a lot of work that the team, what we're formerly known as the Syrian Refugee Resettlement Programme, and now expanded to the Global Resettlement Programme, the team that we have within Housing and Technical Resources to support not only those that were here before the events that have taken place this year, but also the new cases that are coming through from that incident in Ukraine as well. So there's a lot of work that's taken place around that to try and allow these people to settle within South Lanarkshire, working closely with local and national partners to achieve that as well. 5.7 touches again on gypsy travellers, and I'll not dwell on that as we've already spoken at length and taken up enough of your time today with that section. And I suppose the other one to mention in this section is 5.9 in terms of support to victims of domestic abuse at the bottom of the page there. In that we continue to work with our colleagues right across the various partnerships that we have within South Lanarkshire to support those that are impacted by domestic abuse, ensure certainly from our point of view that they have safe accommodation that they can go to, and the support that they need in place to enable them to continue living their lives. Finally, at 5.11, it's probably worth highlighting that all this work that we've done over the last year has been in consultation with a range of different customer groups that we have access to, and we're very fortunate to have willing representatives similar to the Gypsy Traveller sites, and that people are willing to give their time from a range of different customer groups to talk to us about what they would like to see, particularly from an equalities point of view, how we think we can improve and bring a lot of the services we have up to the standard that they would expect. So you can see the list there at 5.11 of all the different groups that we've discussed with. And what we've tried to do, and what we continue to try to do year on year, is make sure that they have the opportunity to contribute to and shape a lot of the council policies and strategies, the resource strategies and policies that we produce throughout the year, just as the way that anybody else within the public or tenants are able to do so as well. I draw your attention then to section 6 of the report, which looks at the key priorities for 22-23, and as you see, it's a lot of what we've already talked about, what I've already run through. We're looking to continue. A lot of the work that we're doing isn't just subject to 1 year. It's something we're trying to progress on year, and the list there that's provided at 6.2 highlights all of that work that we're looking to take forward, or we already are taking forward throughout this year. The next steps for this then is that we also provide an update to the Housing and Technical Resources Committee, so we'll be going to them in December, highlighting some of the positive work that's taken place, and we'll also be going to the parent GICC as well later on this year to provide an update on the same. Happy to take any questions from members if they have any.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ross-Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. But first of all, I'd like to welcome the contents of this. A lot of it is really positive. First question is on the Homes for Ukraine. I don't know how much information we hold about that scheme because it is, a UK scheme, but just to see if you can provide an update as to how that's going. Are there any figures or rough figures that you can provide? I know I've got constituents who have taken in Ukrainians, and there is Ukrainians moving to Larkhall. I remember one posting on a community group recently, and we received a great response of people offering to help them with various things inside their home. And my second question is on engagement. What has been the past engagement, and what are the plans for future engagement with LGBTI plus groups? I don't see that specifically mentioned in the paper unless I've missed it. And as well with people who are care experienced also, and those are obviously two different groups. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Absolutely. In terms of Homes for Ukraine, I can provide an update in relation to numbers. would need to do that retrospectively. It's a very fluid situation in that we have temporary accommodation facilities right across South Lanarkshire now, across all our different resettlement programmes. As I said, the terminology has changed from individual countries, if you like, to now looking at the global resettlement programme, and we're working in partnership nationally with both the Scottish Government and the UK Government to try and deliver these as much as we can on a local level. There's a lot of pressure on the housing sector to meet the demands that have been set by both sets of national governments around this, and we're certainly trying to do our part to achieve that. But I can speak to the team that are involved, and we'll certainly get back the numbers to you from the most up-to-date position that we have. I'd probably also recommend that if once things have calmed down a little bit on that, it may be something, and I know certainly in relation to the Syrian refugee programme we've done before, is a member of the team come along to this group and provide an update in terms of what the team do in terms of supporting families that come to South Lanarkshire, the ongoing work that goes on, because it's not just a case of once they arrive, that's it, they're on their own, it's very much ongoing support. And so I can certainly speak to the officer involved and see if they're able to, once, as I say, things have probably calmed down, because they're, I know, very busy at the moment, dealing with a lot of new cases, but I'll do my best to get the numbers and come back to you on that. Sorry. Second point was the engagement, and you're absolutely right. It probably needs to have more of a position within this report, and it's certainly something we'll take back as feedback and update on. Through the development of our new local housing strategy, we're keen as well to include any actions or any work that we think to do around LGBTI+, and make sure that we engage with as many people as part of the development as possible, but also make sure that the actions for the housing services and also for RSLs and for the private sector as well are reflected within that strategy. So that's something that we will take account of as part of that development.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that answer. That's really helpful, and I'll look forward to see the updates from that. And just on the LGBTI+ thing, it's also will be important going forward, I think, to specifically engage with or look at the issue issues to do with transgender people as well, because even though they are in the LGBTI+ group, they do face a lot of different issues, but just to see that, to keep that in mind as well.
Okay, and can I have Councillor McGeever? Sorry, Jonathan, you want to come back first?
Sorry, just realised that I left one of your questions out there, Councillor, around care experience. Thank you, Kay, for reminding me on that one. Yep, you're absolutely right, and it's something we've actually, it should be on that report, but it is something we have a really close relationship with one of the care experience groups that we have within South Lanarkshire, and we speak to them on a regular basis around a lot of the work that we do. We go along and have pizza parties. Some of the officers get to go along and have a pizza party with a lot of the young people who are not so young now, some of them, but who are involved in that group, and they tell us what they'd like to see within various strategies and plans and things that will impact them. And the best thing that we get from that is real life experience of what they've been through as part of their journey, and allow us to try and rectify any issues that they came across, or make the big policy changes that would help future generations of care experience young people hopefully get through as well. There's a lot more detail in our rapid rehousing transition plan about that, but again, make sure as part of the next report, or even for the committee report, that we reflect that a bit more.
Thank you. Councillor McGeever.
Thanks very much. The question I had relates to kind of loosely to page 5, section 5.2, the adaptations programme. And it may well be that an answer is not readily available, but if I could raise it anyway. I'm wondering how flexible an approach do we take as a council with some of this, because I've experienced, while representing constituents in the past, that say for a ramp to be installed at a person's house, that they have to be referred through the NHS as a wheelchair user. Now, it's great when organisations speak to one another, but when they don't speak to one another, it causes awful bottlenecks for people who are really dependent on a service. I'm just wondering if we ever looked at something like self-directed referral, which is something the NHS uses for things like podiatry and other kind of specialties, because I'm thinking that if we haven't considered this sort of thing, and my experience of it is that an elderly lady who used a wheelchair, but it was purchased privately because she couldn't get a GP appointment during COVID. There's delays getting GP appointments. There's then delays getting referred to specialties. There's then delays getting that specialty to get in touch with the council. You could be looking at a significant period of time where a vulnerable person goes without an adaptation that any reasonable person would conclude they are entitled to. So I know there's difficulties with this, but I'm just wondering if we could look into it, if there's ever been consideration of that, because I'm conscious as well that it is an issue for people who are have a mobility issue, but it's this and other related issues will link to others who have protected characteristics. Accessing services is often particularly difficult, as we all know, for people who maybe don't speak English as a first language or for whatever other reason don't connect with a particular agency. So I'm just wondering if we are taking a more flexible approach or have ever considered it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. You're absolutely right. I think flexibility is probably the key that we need to have within this process. So we are aware of the limitations of the current scheme of assistance, which is the process that we deliver adaptations through for the private sector. And we do have word from the Scottish Government that we're going to get updated guidance on that. And as a result, we've pushed back our review of the scheme of assistance, which was supposed to be this year. Didn't see the point in reviewing it when there's going to be updated guidance coming out. So we've pushed that back on the policy review schedule, which will come to committee later on this year. And that'll be hopefully delivered next year upon subject to the review of the guidance. But one of the issues you've highlighted there is correct in that it's not as flexible as it should be, and perhaps there is more that we could be doing with partners and colleagues across the public sector organisations to enable that flexibility. So we'll take that point on, and hopefully the updated guidance will allow us to have that flexibility.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Garrett-Ferguson.
Thank you. I've got 3 questions that I'd like to ask, if that was all right. On the report on 5.4, looking at that, you're obviously mentioning technology, and I've noticed that how does that fit with the deaf community and sign language? There's nothing obviously mentioning there. And the second question I have is on 5.11. Now, through consultation with various groups, looking at the list there, the deaf community doesn't seem to be included there. So I don't know if the deaf community has been not included. So obviously you've got deaf BSL users actually, rather than hearing impaired people. And then I think the last question is, when a deaf person, for example, goes into a venue, for example, if there's a fire and the fireman comes in and fire person comes in and knocks on the door, and they don't obviously know if there's somebody in or not. Now, a deaf person might be lying there; they're not going to be able to hear the door. The fire person might knock on the door, but there might be somebody in that house. Now, how can the deaf community be supported in for care reasons? Now, obviously, you might have to, a deaf BSL user might be living in that apartment. Now, that's the kind of 3 questions that I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Nope, I'm happy to take all 3 of these questions. So, in terms of 5.4 with sign language, you're absolutely correct. That's something we can take back to the team and make sure that we are consulting with 5.4 is different. I was looking at 5.11 there. So 5.4 in terms of technology enabled care, that is something that we can do and try and use technology to our best of our ability to allow people access to any kind of work that we're doing or any services that we have. So certainly we'll take that feedback back, and we will hopefully be able to progress that. Question 2 at 5.11, representation from the deaf community. you're absolutely correct that they're not on that list, and we'll look to improve that. I know we did have a number of representatives, I think 2 representatives actually, on a couple of the other groups who are deaf and able to provide their input through the translation services. So we'll continue to make sure that we provide adequate opportunities for those who are deaf to contribute to the work that we're doing there. In terms of question 3, it's good that you mentioned that actually. Having just been involved in the writing of our consultative draft to the next local housing strategy, that is one of the actions, the opportunity to use technology to help people in the event of fire safety. So we're looking at anybody who's got mobility issues, any disabilities, any kind of mental impairments, anything like that may not be able to evacuate a building in such a way that anybody else may be able to, then that's something that we're looking to explore and using technology to do that. And we've had discussions with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, with the Scottish Government as well, to see what funding would be available for us to do that. And as I say, it's in the consultative draft just now as an action to be progressed within the LHS, and hopefully that will make it into the final version and we'll be able to take that forward over the course of the strategy.
Thank you. Next one is Councillor Ali Salamati.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for the the very good report. My question or concern goes back regarding the refugees coming here in South Lanarkshire. For very basic issues like the food and stuff, the refugees, when they arrive, they're housed in the the hotels, as temporary measure. During last Ramadan, lots of the Syrian refugees or Arab refugees were having issues with for early morning breakfast and stuff. I don't know if council was involved at all or not. But through the community, the groups, they managed to provide some help. But recently, a Ukrainian family, a Muslim community family, arrived in Iskabride in June. And they were housed in one of these, the hotels, and now the temporary, the accommodation needs to be vacated, and they were going to move them to a council, facility or council home. They are currently in Iskabrad, but they were offered, something in Hamilton. You need to understand people coming from war zones and they're not familiar. When they get settled, in the school for children and stuff, they feel, comfortable there, and they were kind of said, there's nothing in Iskabride in terms of council, estate, and you have to go to Hamilton, the Hamilton, yeah, and to know the places were shown, it's like was a child, the teenager, like a boy and a young daughter, and they were given, the 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom, the flat, run down, it's like a wet, everything, the leaking and stuff. So it's really, they were coming, saying what are our choices or options and stuff. Sorry, I'm asking these things. Maybe not, they're relevant to this report. I understand your report is up to a certain time, but I was wondering, if the council's, the provision, for the refugees who are coming to South Lanarkshire, is it like a certain, the building, or they are dispersed across the, the whole area and towns? The reason I'm asking is, we had when we had this, war in Kosovo, people came in Glasgow, for example, they were housing, the state, the council estates, in concentrate in one place, and that caused a lot of social issues. I'm just concerned that, if we are focusing and concentrating all these people in the same place, it would maybe from admin point of view, access to officers and stuff maybe makes sense, but in social terms, that might not be really easy for them to integrate and causes them lots of problems later on. So just to make an observation here. Thank you.
Slight technical glitch, if you can bear with us.
Thanks, Councillor. No, you're absolutely right to raise the point. It is a very point, and as I said in response to an earlier question, it's a very fluid situation and a very high pressurised situation in that we have a large influx of households, all with different needs, coming into an area already has, demands on housing and pressure on housing. And the example you gave between East Kilbride and Hamilton is a perfect example of that, in that East Kilbride, particularly from a social housing point of view, is already a very, very pressurised area, in that we have a large number of people wanting to live in a limited amount of properties that we have available. It is a partnership approach that we're taking to allocate as many houses as possible to anybody coming in through that programme. It's a partnership approach in terms of it's not just social housing, it's the private sector. We're working with private landlords through a company called Mears, who have the UK Government Home Office contract to work with private landlords to identify suitable accommodation, make sure that's of the right standard, and make sure it's in the right location as well. So we're part of that consultation process, working with them to make sure we're not putting anybody anywhere that wouldn't be acceptable to them, wouldn't be suitable to them or the individual members of their household as well. So in addition to that, we're working with RSL partners to see what accommodation they have available across different areas of South Lanarkshire. So it is, as I say, a very much a fluid situation, in that the team are doing what they can to find a suitable accommodation for the different households that are coming in. That might always not be in the place where they've been temporarily settled. And that's something, I suppose, as I said in relation to an earlier question, we could get an update from the team that are involved in that, and the process and the thought behind where people are allocated. I think probably the kind of point on that to raise as well is that we are experiencing a really high demand for housing coming, and a lot of pressure coming from both sets of national governments, and the housing sector as a whole is doing what it can, and thinking outside the box as much as it can as well, to try and find suitable accommodation for people. But support is always there. So if people have been put in places that they don't know because they haven't been residing in temporary accommodation there, then the team should be able to then provide the support for them to make the links with the local community, make the links with perhaps other people from the same programme that they've come from as well. So they shouldn't be left alone. So if they are being put in somewhere, they shouldn't ever be left alone. It should be a continuous level of support that's provided, and certainly we'd hope that's happening. But if you know of circumstances where that's not, then I'd be happy to hear them and take them back to the team.
Okay, thank you. Next one's Kirsten Robb, Councillor Robb.
Thank you. Really good report. You can see the difference looking at the using the Fairer Scotland duty, and then quality impact assessments make when a resource really genuinely takes on that self-scrutiny and commitment to improving and doing more on equality as well. So it wasn't so much about this report, but all to ask about a process, how other resources do equality impact assessments, and using the Fairer Scotland duty to ensure other resources also take that detailed scrutiny and see what you can do more. So it's how they do them and where they get reported. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. If I could just pick that up. All the resources across the council do impact assessments and Fairer Scotland assessments in the same way. We do have 2 opportunities for elected members to attend sessions on impact assessments and for Fairer Scotland duty assessments coming up in October. So that's there, and again, it's from a scrutiny point of view. There's not an awful lot of people have put themselves forward for the impact assessment as budget impact assessments, which will be coming up later in the year. So again, it's a good opportunity to see how we work and how we get the information. So again, if there's anything else that you're looking for, if you just let me know, and I'll see what I can do to help you.
Yes, yes, Kirsten.
And just to follow up to ask where those equality, are those also reported here, those annual reports, so we can see, say, how transportation have addressed equality?
Yeah, they are reported. All the annual reports follow the same structure. So you'll get all the resources that come along and explain what they've been doing to mainstream equalities, and that includes the impact assessments and things like that.
Thank you. Next one up is Councillor Janine Kalikas.
Hi. Hi, Mo. Sorry, I was just about to cancel because my question has just been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There's no other questions. I have two questions. First one thing that's came up with the Blantyre Care Hub was the fact that there's bariatric adaptation for the care hub itself, but the adapted homes don't have any bariatric adaptations, and they're not suited for it. And the second one is that I know we have 1,514 homes that are adapted. What is a policy on when they're available? Do we look for people that are looking for the adaptations to suit them, or do we take the adaptations out and then put it back to normal use? So I think that's the two questions there.
Thanks, Chair. In relation to your first question, I know that our private sector and development team had come back to you. The response should be with you now regarding the care hub. If it's not, I'll do the chasing of that when I go back upstairs. And I don't have it to hand, I'm afraid, in terms of what the response said, but certainly be happy to share that with you after the meeting if you haven't already seen it. And in relation to your second question of adaptations, so yes, so the allocation, at the point of allocation, if we do an adaptation and that tenant then moves out for whatever reason, what we try and do is have a look at our housing list and see if there's somebody that could make use of that adaptation. It'd be a complete waste of resources to rip it all out and start again, should that person end up needing that anyway after the assessment's done. So we'll try and do that where we can. If it can't be done, then we try and mitigate that by minimising, if you like, the impact that adaptation has to the property. So take it back as far as we can. That allows then somebody who doesn't need that to live within that. But then it's easy enough for us to tweak again. Should they themselves need that, or should another tenant moves in, it needs that as well. So it depends on what the adaptation is, really. Depends how much work we do. But you're absolutely right. We have a policy in place that tries to fit the tenant with the property, should they wish to live there, to allow it to make the most of the resourcing that we've put into that adaptation. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. I need to apologise because my first question was a bit confused, because my point was that I know we don't have bariatric adaptations for the care hub, but my question should have been that in future builds, I think we need to really look at bariatric care and have some houses, the future builds, to have bariatric adaptations such as floors and the door widths and things like that, so that we don't need to later on add them in.
No, you're absolutely right, Chair. It's another consideration we need to give in something that we want to make housing as accessible as possible, particularly new housing where we have the opportunity to do that. I'll point back again, and apologies, I keep repeating myself, but the next local housing strategy, the consultative draft that's out just now, we have actions within that to look at that, and it's just been through a couple of representatives from the Social Work Committee as well who have made the same point and saying that we need to explore how we make the most out of the new build housing to avoid having to go back in and make the adaptations at such an early stage when the paint's still wet, if you like. So absolutely something we can take forward within the strategy and look and see how we incorporate that into the design of homes, and then also look how we fund that as well. Is it something we can apply for additional grant for through the new guidance associated to this Affordable Housing Supply Programme, or is that something the Council itself will need to resource, and where would that sit?
Okay, thank you. Does the forum agree to note the report? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's that. There's no urgent business and no items intimated. So thank you very much for the very first meeting. But we will be sending an email out asking everyone to respond. Look at the list of topics we want to look at. And if you can please respond to that, then the next meeting we'll go through and pick and place it in the different years so that we have a plan for the future. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. No, the complexity.